A couple of my proud ones are actually there at Flexware. I've got 3 students at Flexware. I got guys at Tesla. I got guys at Honda that are my students. Guys and gals, right? All over the place. And I still keep in touch with them. I know who they are. I know where they're at. It's really cool to have that experience and have that outreach.
Welcome back to the Manufacturing Come Up. I'm your host, Malachi Greb. Today, we have a special guest, a fellow controls engineer, John Pillar. How's it going?
How are you, sir?
Doing well.
Good.
So, you've been in the space for some time now.
Yeah.
You've definitely climbed the ladder. You tested out all the ropes. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
All right. So, I first got into industry, graduated out of Purdue University with my bachelor's in 2001. I thought I was going to be a electrical contractor. So my first job was with Fisk Electric in Texas, Houston, Texas, and I was the project estimator. And Fisk Electric was 8th largest contractor in the nation at the time. We had just finished Enron Field. We were building Enron Tower 2, and then Enron happened. So that whole debacle, I learned all about what it means when a large company makes the mistakes Enron made while we are building a building for them. So I lived that life right off the bat. Tropical Storm Allison hit me while I was in Houston, which was very large. Little Indiana boy didn't know what we were that close to the Gulf of Mexico at the time. And then 9/11 happened. So my future wife, current girlfriend at that point in time, was in Indianapolis. So I went back to Indy and I started working with a company called Integrator.com. They built jails. So really. So I spent 10 years building jails using machine controls. They're buildings that hold people. So we started with PLC5s and Slick.io, Wonderware screens, moved into Logix platform and using DeviceNet IO all over a building. So I lived the pain of DeviceNet over a multi-story, multi-facility building all over. And did that for 10 years in multiple different fashions, project engineer, project designer, did consulting work for them after Stanley Tools purchased them, and then moved up to that's really how I came through and learned how to be a controls engineer. My wife and I decided to move back into South Bend, northern Indiana, where we were from, and took some consulting and continued consulting with the jails. That's what I was doing, but that was driving all over, building jails with them. And then I did contracting again, electrical contracting for a while. And then professor tapped me and said, hey, his name is Professor Jacob at Purdue. And he said, you need to apply for this position. And so I spent 7 years as a professor with Purdue. 2019, I got an offer I couldn't refuse to get an itch into the startup world. And I had been playing in the startup world from 2019 until earlier this year, doing machine learning. We were doing OEE and whatnot in the space for a company called Odin Technologies. I was then working with a company called Liveline Technologies, which was really kind of cool. We were using extruders and we were doing optimization. We got some really cool optimization going on with them. Kind of fizzled there. And my last deal with startup was with a company called Alcatraz AI. I was director of field support for that group. Kind of reached back into my jails. Some buddies from that went into biometrics, and so they were doing video face recognition for card access, and I was working with them and the installation of the systems. So that's a really short blurb of what I've done along the way here, Malachi. But there was a lot going along the way. Lot that I could talk about. I can give you all kinds of jail stories. I can give you all kinds of manufacturing stories, all kinds of extrusion problems. And like I said, 10 years of the jails, almost 10 years of teaching, and then now 4 or 5 years worth of startup life. And then, yeah, my own consulting company all along that way. Currently, consulting company is still open. I was part of the big tech layoff of 2023, so I do have a manufacturing kind of job right now. I still teach for a university in Germany and I do on energy studies, a seminar on that once a semester.
Nice. What was it like going through these transitions? One, I definitely want to dive a little bit more into like the controls engineering on jails and prisons and whatnot. I mean,
Sure.
I think that's a pretty interesting line of work that I think most people don't go through. Um, but like for the different career shifts, one, you shifted from that and then went over to teaching, and then you went from teaching to doing the startup world. I feel like both of those are fairly big transitions from one another. Can you kind of take us through like what those transitions were like?
Yeah. So the the going from electrical construction to the jails, that was a lot of the same skill set, right? It's a building. So I was working with the electricians doing all that work. So that wasn't a big stretch. Back and forth a couple times, as I moved to locations physically where the job was
Right.
available. Teaching was interesting. That was a big leap. Learning what I didn't know, making assumptions across the board. I started teaching in West Lafayette. I taught for a year there, and then transitioned to one of the statewide locations here in South Bend. The wife and a baby was still up here. And when I made that transition, I actually was one of 3 professors teaching an entire bachelor's degree for electrical engineering technology for Purdue. And so I had over 38 named courses that I had to teach. So I was doing everything from freshman op amps all the way through 3-phase and motor controls and PLCs that I was hired for
Wow.
originally, right? So that was a big stretch of learning all that, along with how do you teach somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big deal. It was, man, that transition was cool. Teaching was fun. I am a teacher at heart,
Mm.
but the transition into doing machine learning and trying to push the envelope of what we could do in controls, working with startup individuals who had no idea that they literally came to me, Malachi, and said, "Hey, where do I plug this Ethernet jack into a device that was a 485 network?" Right? So that was where my value came to them of working with them in that process. They were computer science individuals, and I learned a lot from them, and a lot about business. Honestly, how do you get valuated, and going through all that. So those transitions were kind of rough, uh,
Mhm.
but I made it. And every time along the way, why did we make choices? To move on to the next project, right? So I went from Odin to Liveline. Uh, Odin didn't want to do field devices. They figured out hardware was hard, right? So it kind of built a lot of my way of thinking about how do you network in a manufacturing facility so that you future proof what you're doing. How do you start making it so it's easier for people who aren't in the OT space to be able to grab
Yep.
your information and give you value in the cloud. Um,
Yep.
and brought that into Liveline to allow us to we actually optimized lines from 20 to 50% reduction in scrap. It wasn't ML, it was just straight optimization. So I don't know, did that answer your question? I think I tried.
Yeah,
I'll try.
yeah, we'll probably dig deeper into all the different things too.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think transitions are important because I think there's a lot of learning that goes on through transitions, and also there's like a lot of decision making that happens during a transition, like why you're shifting, like, and I think it gives a lot of insights to people who are navigating their career and like which direction to go and why to choose different
sure.
directions. Yep. I think it's definitely interesting going into the startup world. That's a whole nother world. You mentioned too about just like the connectivity of devices, like that's super important. Like we try to do almost everything that we can, like over Ethernet IP or IO link, some type of communication protocol, so that way it's a smart enough device that maybe we're not using the information now, but that we can go back later and catch that information. Um, so I think things like that are super important. But as far as taking this back to doing controls on gel cells, like tell me what this is like.
So I mean, you know how you peel back the curtain and it doesn't sound, once you know how it works, you're like, that's it.
Hmm.
So yeah, jails are machines that hold people, right? So we were using PLC fives back in the day. They are using control. They're using Logix platforms now. There's another group that was a splinter of them. They're using Omron. Just but it's dry contact. Okay, so you got to learn that there's two types of swing doors, the mechanics of how the lock works. And so you set up a relay to work appropriately with it. If it has a mechanical latch that tells you that it's held back, or do you have to constantly provide power to hold the solenoid back?
Yeah.
Kind of a deal.
Yep. No more lock and then unlock type of
Yep,
situation.
yep. So it's not a big deal on that, but then you also know that there's two switches. There's a lock status. It tells you that the bolt's there. There's a door position switch, tells you it's in the frame. So now you know it's locked and secured, kind of a deal. So
Gotcha.
but you do that 1,000 times, right?
No.
Yeah, right? Because every door is that. And then
Yeah.
every door has an intercom, probably on both sides. Every door probably has a camera pointing to it, so you got to call that camera up. So I learned all about how matrix switchers and cameras worked. I learned all about intercoms, and back in the day, we were literally using relays clicking. It was old school telephone relay click,
Oh wow.
right? So there was a relay board that had the active communication that way. Now they're using Ethernet IP intercoms and such. So it's switcher faster, kind of a deal. IP cameras, it's easier now, but we had to write basic programs that push down serial comms to pull up cameras at the right time and organize all that. So yeah, it was really cool, kind of a system. We call them in controls e-stop buttons, but we had those exact same buttons as duress buttons on the wall when there was an issue. How do you call that setup, kind of a deal. I didn't have to worry about safety circuits, but still you had all those possibilities that you had to deal with.
Yeah, I'm sure there's also like quite a bit of interlocking too, where like you got to open one door and then make sure another door's closed before another door opens or something like that. Like,
yep, all that interlock code, all of that is the same. Yeah, kind of a deal. They call those Sally ports. You open one door, it closes, you get to go to the next door. But then you get a Sally port override because you got a 8-foot ladder, 10-foot ladder that's got to come through, kind of a deal too. So,
gotcha.
Yep, all that worked in.
Awesome. Well, so whenever you transition from being a teacher to being to start going to the startup world, what was that like?
It was abrupt. It was so August of 2019. I was coming back from Germany. I was teaching in Germany for the summer, and Odin gave me an offer. Actually, while I was in Germany, and so I didn't go back to school. I went straight to work, and it was in Manhattan, right? So I was working remote. I knew what Zoom was and Slack was before the world learned about it, right? So I was doing all that, working remote to the guys in Manhattan. It wasn't that big of a change because I had a very young group of we called them forward deployment engineers, but it was the install techs, right? That we were they were all engineering. We mostly mechanical engineers. We were installing devices that were parasitically pulling data from the line. So Odin's technology wasn't that it was pulling data from the PLC. They would put a secondary device on the line that was also measuring speed, rotation, temperature, whatever you wanted to do, and then punching that up to the cloud. Sometimes they were pulling serial data, right? And so that's why I was there to help them figure out what can we get data from, what do we not get data from, kind of a deal. So it was cool in that I was teaching fresh out of school individuals how to go do that work, and it was a lot like teaching, and then going and doing experiments. That was my first experience with Siemens, right? Because it was all Rockwell, but now I'm all over the place. So I had Siemens processors we were working on. Uh, Automation Direct, people don't like to talk about that, but you know that they're out there all over the place too. And the Rockwell, and then it was educational to me because I was learning all these new terms. Um, what does valuation mean? How do you create a SaaS program? What does all that mean? How do you talk to somebody who has a lot of money and wants to give it to you, but will give it to you if you can explain to him in 5 minutes what the ROI is? That was a big deal, right? Across the board. So that was cool. In November of 19, they decided the hardware was hard. The venture capitalist said, you know what, that's not making us any money. Just go straight to the cloud. And I had to then pull on my contractor's hat and figure out if I'm going to convince my customers, how much is it going to cost for them to start sending that data to us, kind of a deal. So I had to go and do all the quick calculations of estimates of what it was going to take. We had a great deal of customers that were out there, and then we were going to tell them, hey, we're deprecating this hardware that you've had. So you can imagine how that went. And then in March of 2020, the world was dying, and we were moving on to another adventure. So yeah.
Gotcha. So was that new venture, was that like you moving on personally, or was that like your venture itself moving on?
They let the forward deployment individuals go. I actually had a new spot to go to, so I moved to a contractor that wanted to do a lot of work like what you're doing, what Elite Automation does. It's up in Edwardsburg. So I was helping him start up and do machine automation and whatnot across the board. I had a place to go. And then Liveline came up as an option. So I jumped onto them and started doing some really cool work for a year and a half with them.
How did you like the integration side of things?
Integration's cool. Yep. I mean, it's fun.
Yeah.
I am a machine builder and not a manufacturer. I think of myself as a hunter gatherer, not a farmer. So where I am right now is a new world as manufacturing kind of a deal.
Gotcha.
I'm learning more about how they observe. I'm learning a lot of secrets that I wish I would have known as an SI. Of how they do work and stuff too. But
Yeah.
also our SIs are like, oh crap, Pillar's here. He knows, he
Yeah.
knows how we bid stuff, kind of a deal too. So
Yeah.
that's some of my value here right now. What I'm doing in this loop.
Yeah. I think that's definitely like something that would have been like valuable for me, because like I've not worked like directly in a manufacturing facility ever. I've always been on the system integration side of things. I've spent months inside of manufacturing facilities at a time, but most of the time that's support. It's a whole nother lens of looking at it. You're not in the internal meetings talking about downtime of this machine and what does their ROI look like, and what are the things that are like really important to them.
Yep.
And so being able to experience like being firsthand like on the manufacturing floor, and especially if you're dealing with any equipment side of things, so now you're having direct involvement with the customer side of the system integration.
Yeah, it's so again, I peeled back the curtain and I saw things that I didn't think it worked that way, because it's a black box, right? Where you're standing. And so now for example, to me, it makes perfect sense that you would want everything networked, right? They're asking me in my first week here, they've asked me, where's this data and how long did this thing run? And I go, you guys aren't recording that. There's nowhere that's recording. It's coming up to actually just lights right now, right? And and they're like, oh, okay. Why wouldn't you have been doing that already? Kind of a deal.
Yeah.
It's not a heavy lift. There's a lot of good bones here at this particular facility. They're a large international company that are all over the place. And then again, where I expected there to be a standard in a large international company, they're individual, I would call them city states. South Bend has their own design. And what's cool is I literally get to design it for them. What I've learned is I am the second controls engineer that they've had, and the other guy's been here for 20 years, and he's down in Georgia.
Got you.
For an international manufacturer, right? They're all process
Wow.
engineers. They're all chemists and process engineers.
But yeah, so there's some facilities that have, no controls engineers, one or two controls engineers,
Yeah.
and other facilities that have 30 controls engineers.
Yeah. So Liveline is actually a subsidiary of Cooper Standard. Okay. So
Okay.
and so that's a very large international manufacturer also. And I was not the only controls engineer there. I was one of the controls engineers in the Liveline division of it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, they were all over the board. They were able to do lots of. They were organized, for the lack of
Yeah.
a better term.
Yeah.
They were still segregated in their own individual spots, but they had a pattern. They had a set standard. Here, where I'm at now, it's not.
Not there yet.
Yeah, and it's okay. I mean, they've succeeded. They're making money. I can't complain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They pay me right, but it's just a matter of they're dependent on the local controls engineers and local contractors to come in and they trust, right? So
Right.
it is a matter of trust. You know how you build that reputation and capability, and now they're at a point where they're thinking some people are getting a little over trusting, so they put out a bid for a controls engineer, and I stepped up for that. So
Nice.
and what's cool is, as you know, when you are in a neighborhood for a while, I know all the SIs that are here. I walked in and I was like, "Hey, how are you? I'm sorry, I'm going to change the world a little bit. It's your calculus moves just a little bit, but I still need them."
Yeah.
I do not have any software to program PLCs. That's just not a thing. They handed me a machine and it's got Microsoft Office on it. So I'm in the process of working on. Hey, I'm not a fool. I can have admin access on my laptop, kind of a deal. This is a corporate
Yeah.
problem that I have to now work through and talk
Yeah.
to IT that's up in Minnesota, and get that
Yeah.
process. So I
Yeah.
still need them to do their
Yeah.
job. It's just I'm going to change a little bit of how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like we have some customers that I would say is like in a very similar position to you. It's they came in and they have a few controls engineers at all their different facilities throughout the United States, but they hired a pretty high level guy, senior guy, to come in and start looking at all their facilities, looking at like all the controls hardware they have, all their different systems, and start and coming in basically to analyze like what type of things need upgraded, what what's outdated, what makes sense to upgrade. Doing all the cost analysis along with that, and I think it's important for companies to have somebody in that position to analyze as a corporation or as a company. What is the status of all of our equipment and on a detailed like controls type of level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm starting that conversation. So next week I have a call in with the lead IT networking guy and the other controls engineer that's been here for a long time. I'm calling those meetings right now, trying to build that and build that conversation.
Yeah.
I don't believe it was the intent of the plant manager that, I'm just going to have a controls engineer and he's going to be in my house. Hey, like I said, I'm a hunter gatherer, not a farmer. So, I
Right.
want to fix 70 sites, not just one. Right.
Right. Absolutely. So you're organically probably going to just end up in that position.
That's if I stay here, that will be my goal, right? You got to grow that,
Right.
that how that is. I got kicked pretty hard here, in that tech bubble. Director of field support to controls engineer. So
Right. Yeah.
you know how it works. That's cool.
Yeah. You got to take different transitions in life and career anyway.
Yeah.
Take on new opportunities. Yeah, I mean, you already went from being a contractor, being a controls engineer, and shifting over to being a teacher. I mean, if you can do that shift, you can do about anything.
Yep.
I do want to kind of dive into the education side of things a little bit, because like education has been something like that I really want to get involved in. But I know for me personally, two things: one, I don't have the time commitment that I would need, and secondly, I just can't bring myself to like doing things like grading people's homework and and dealing with the that paperwork side of things.
The first thing, I learned really quick. Every homework assignment that I gave a student meant that I was going to have 20 homework assignments myself, right? So um, it luckily I worked for the College of Technology, not the College of Engineering, right? So for every lecture there was a 3 hour lab. So the lab is where most of the work got done, where you would do all those pieces of actual work and working with the students. That was fun. That you know I had a lab that I was pretty sure I knew how it worked, and every semester a student would be like, "But I'm going to do it this way," and they're like, "What are you doing? Why'd you do that?" Okay, cool. And so you would add that to the syllabus, right? You put that on the syllabus. Say, don't let's not do this. But but yeah, it was a fun deal. Uh, the intent was that I was going to be in West Lafayette. I ended up moving up to the South Bend statewide space. So there's 10 statewide locations that are West Lafayette students. I don't know if you knew this. South Bend being one of them. And so my faculty head was in West Lafayette. So my students were Boilermakers. It's just they were down there. We have an IU South Bend, which are Titans, not Hoosiers, right? That kind of a deal across the board. Um, and so the goal was that they were going to have me replace my entire graduate committee. So I had three professors for my graduate committee. One was focused on three-phase motors. One was focused on three-phase and standards, and one that was focused on controls. And they replaced all three of them with me. You know, but a opening came up in South Bend, and I looked at the department head and I said, I still have a wife and a house and a brand new baby in South Bend. I spent a year down here in Lafayette. I'd move my life, but wouldn't it be easier for you to find a Purdue professor who wants to be in West Lafayette than South Bend? There's this other little school up here that has that Irish fetish up here that people think of in South Bend. So he saw the sense to it. I did not know I signed up for 32 different courses that I would teach along the way. So that was the killer part, Malachi. Doing three-phase, doing motors, doing controls, that was easy. I had to remember how to do op amps. I had to remember how to do all of that work and run those labs. That was the fun piece. Uh, Obviously, I got lucky that I moved on just before everything had to go online, and then ended up I teach online all the time now for a university in Germany, right? So I'm still doing that process. It's fun to watch individuals learn the topic and then suddenly get that boom, and you see that snap of how they got it. And then you also know you've got some that I'm here, I'm going to get my C, let's move on and move on to the other classes because they belong. They're getting those snaps in other places, right? It was really cool at South Bend in that I would know a student basically from freshman year all the way through their senior design. I knew pretty much all about these guys, right? A couple of my proud ones are actually there at Flexware. I've got 3 students at Flexware. I've got guys at all over the place. It's really cool. I talk about them all. I got guys at Tesla. I got guys at Honda that are my students. Guys and gals, right? All over the place. And I still keep in touch with them. I know who they are. I know where they're at. It's really cool to have that experience and have that outreach. It just builds that network. So, I hear what you're saying about having to grade someone. You don't have to grade them when you know they know what they're doing, right? You're in that spot. You got to give them a grade. That's the purpose of the class. But really, it's the knowledge passing and seeing that multiplex of my knowledge. There are things that are happening in this world that I would have never touched, but because I said something to that student, they are doing that work today. Think about those teachers that you have. And I'm not saying that I was good at it. I'm not saying I was a great teacher, but I'm saying there's something that those people are doing that I gave to them, and that's really cool,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would say definitely for myself, like I'm for sure a teacher at heart. I notice like anytime I'm doing something or working with somebody, I want to like, share my knowledge and spread my knowledge, and the teaching aspect of things is something I've always been really excited about. Um, yeah, I think the biggest thing is just it's the extra like teacher work that comes along with it that'd be challenging for me.
Yeah, I mean, you find solutions to that, right? That's what we do. We're engineers. You find the solution to those pieces, right? So, um, you develop the labs across the board and you make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. So what do you kind of see for your future?
The future is that's a good question. Um, I am excited for where I am. I've got a couple guys on the engineering team. All of them are less than 5 years out of school. They are excited and eager to learn about controls. So I'm teaching again here in this team. I'm learning now new things about, like I said, manufacturing. How do they think about it versus how did I think about it as an SI? So it's always an adventure and moving forward and just solving and learning those new pieces. It's new environment, new ideas, new thoughts, new process, and new conversations that then add to my skill set. So just keep learning, keep trucking, and yeah, try not to have too many hats on at any given time. That's one of my biggest
All right.
problems. Yeah.
What do you find something valuable throughout your career as you've shifted around? What has been like one of your key things to success?
Being able to step back and see the forest for the trees, right? Absolutely. Um, because I'm an electrical engineer, but I had to learn hydraulics, pneumatics, and all of those pieces. And the first thing I did was translate it into electronics. Then, as a teacher, I can now translate electronics into mechanics and being able to extrapolate everything out and learning that E equals I times R is just F equals MA. Once you know that, dude, nothing's hard. Just move on, right? It all fits into that piece.
Right. So I guess for you, a big thing was like kind of just like what see a lot of things for what they are. Can you dive in a little bit deeper into that?
So it's system, right? So uh, I've got chemical engineers that are here and they say, hey, I'm process engineers, I'm chemical engineers, I do manufacturing, and I don't know any of those electronics things, but I really want to learn them. No, you do know the electronics things, you just didn't think about it in the way that perhaps you and I learned as in our classes, right? How we learned how the electrons flow, but these guys know how water flows. So you have to see the system and be able to zoom back and then get into the problem, solve the problem, zoom back out, see what it changed, and back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. I think that a big thing is like being able to connect the dots and be able to find like how all these different things work together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nothing's
absolutely.
new. Nobody is smarter than you. No matter no that you have a PhD. You just have a PhD
Right.
in what you've been doing.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important for people to know like whenever they're like this probably maybe happens like more like mid-career where individuals like maybe start to question like their expertise or their experience level, and especially if you've done any bouncing around at all, if you've moved from like one particular thing to another, it's like you kind of wonder like am I an expert at a thing? And I think that every little detail that you learned gave you like a valuable nugget, some extra skill set that like other people actually don't have.
Yep. Absolutely.
Where can people find you at, John?
You can find me at jpillerdc.com. That's my website. And it's also Genau, GENAU.us. Genau is German for I am listening, I'm hearing what you say. So that was what I picked for my controls division of J Pillar Design and Consulting.
Thank you for being with us today, John.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You too.